Hey everybody! Today we're talking about the Ming Dynasty. Lasted roughly from 1368 to 1644, and is in what is now present day mostly China. It wasn't all of China, but it was a big chunk of it. And mostly, what we'll be discussing about the Ming Dynasty, is how they gain power. So it's a process of getting and expanding it. Consolidating power is a process of taking control from other people who also have power, and then also maintaining power, process of keeping one's power. The main ones we'll really want to focus on is gaining and consolidating. Specifically, that's going to be on your summative for this unit, so we'll try to focus on those two, but we will discuss some aspects of how they maintain power. So, how the Ming came to power was the Mongols. Yes, those Mongols I talked about earlier that through supposedly through spies infested with the Black Plague into Kaffa, ruled what is mostly present day China. Like you think of Marco Polo, he went to the court of Kublai Khan, who is actually a Mongol descendant. I think his grandfather was Genghis Khan, one of the biggest rulers of the time when he was around. Uh, anyway, so they had ruled their empire, which is basically China, for many years. And then a peasant's son, Hong Wu, led a rebellion against the Mongols. Uh, he was actually successful and ended up kicking out the Mongols. So he led a rebellion and kicked out the Mongols and became emperor. So that's how he gained power. The Ming Dynasty gained power that way. Consolidation of power. So they got the power, and now they're going to try to keep the power, get more power, so they don't have a chance of someone coming and kicking them out. Okay. So they made reforms to agriculture. It's said that they grew even more rice than they ever had before. They went and erased all traces of the Mongols. Like, hey, the Mongols were never here. This is China. Just to sort of get that chapter of China's history out of there. And they promoted China's power and prosperity. We'll talk about that in a second, a little bit more. He also made the government better by hiring people who were actually good for the job. Because before, a lot of times, it's just who was your father, who was your family. That's how you got a job. So he made a lot of reforms, made the government work a lot better. He went and even built additions to the Great Wall. Like if you went there today, most of the additions, that he built are the one is the part of the wall that you're visiting actually. And all this helps consolidate his power because he's making everybody's life better with making agriculture better. He's getting rid of the bad history of the Mongols, for the Chinese. And he's making China feel, the Chinese feel more powerful, and he's making them more wealthy too with the increased agriculture. And then he also has something later, his secret police. He towards the end he started getting a little paranoid. He thought people were trying to get him. He was still trying to consolidate power, so he thought people were trying to take the power from him. So he did end up having a lot of people killed. And when we're usually talking about China, it's not just, hundreds, it's thousands. Whenever you talk about China, stuff is usually in a bigger scale. He did have these great voyages. We'll talk about it with Zheng Ha, that promoted their power throughout not the world, but a good chunk of the world. And also, eventually, we'll talk about it. Hung Wu died, and his son took over and actually moved the capital to Beijing. So before, I believe it was Nanking, was where the Mongols had set up. Well, like let's go to Beijing, clean start, like not even a trace of the Mongols who were here. So these voyages by Zheng Ha were like a big PR campaign, if you want to say, like to show how great China is. In total, there was 7 voyages. And it would range from 40 ships to 300 ships, which back then, guys, that's still a lot. I mean, now it's a lot if we have 300 ships at once. They had treasure ships that were 400 feet long, and in comparison, Columbus's Santa Maria was only 85 feet, so over 4 times bigger than that. Up, they had up to 27,000, crew. That's a whole lot. And how I was talking about numbers in China, a lot of times numbers are just a lot bigger. Um, Gave gifts of silver and silk to other countries just to show like how awesome we are. Oh, we're just giving you this stuff, silver and silk, to show you we're so powerful. We don't even need it. We'll give you some. And he's also asking tribute from countries. So 16 countries sent tribute to China, to the Ming Dynasty. And when a country does that, pays tribute, it shows they're weaker in answering to the Ming emperor in this case. Saying like, "Oh, we're not as good as you. We're going to have to like follow your lead." So this was a really big deal. Like I said, there's 7 times. And here is a map of it. So you see, they went all the way from here in eastern China, all throughout here with Indonesia, Bangladesh, India, even in what is Iran, and even in the Middle East, where Saudi Arabia is, and even down at the bottom, they go into Africa some. So during this time, that is a far ways away. The capability to be able to sail your ship that far is just something that not a lot of people could do. Like the Europeans weren't doing something like this at this time at all. So eventually, the Ming fall. So what led to that was actually ineffective leaders. With emperors, kings, royalty, it's not like how today is where you choose your leader. It's just the genetic lottery, guys. Sometimes you're going to have a good leader, but then maybe his firstborn son, if that's who's, becomes the emperor or king, maybe isn't the smartest. Maybe he's got different characteristics, and you're not always going to have a good leader. It's going to be, maybe you'll have 4 good leaders, and then you'll have 20 bad leaders. It's just up and down, up and down. It's all a dice roll. The government officials became corrupt, so they weren't running the government as well. They're maybe taking bribes, stuff like that. They were broke after spending that much on those voyages. China was pretty broke at that time, and then to make up for that, they tried to do high taxes. Well, if they're broke and they're taking high taxes, the common people don't have much money then anyways. And on top of that, they had bad harvest, not just one, like multiple harvests, and starvation. You got to remember, it wasn't until a couple hundred years ago, you weren't that far from starvation. It could be a couple not so great harvests would throw a country into starving. There was a Star of Rebellion after all this. And then these people called the Manchus, which is just north of where the Ming's power was, invaded, and with all that chaos, it came in and captured Beijing, and they actually became the emperors of China. And there's this fun little meme I saw here. So you see the Ming Dynasty, nomadic raiders. That means they're like people that wander around, but they're big groups of them, especially I'll talk about here in just a second. In this basically big plain area, there's huge hordes of them. So you see him throwing out nomadic raiders. Well, then you see at the very bottom, nomadic raiders are behind him. Well, the Manchus are nomadic raiders, and it's sort of funny that they throw them out, and then they get thrown out by nomadic raiders. If we back up, if you can see, this area is where the Manchus would be. And then you see here, originally the Mongols are from this area. And a thing that's interesting, just a side note in history, a lot of these nomadic tribes come and conquer areas, and they're all, this whole little area, this sort of spits them out every couple hundred years almost. We'll be talking about the Ottomans. They're Turkish, and they're originally from this area. The Mongols were from this area. The Manchus were from this area. So, like, throughout of history, it wasn't until recently, every so often there'd be one powerful tribe and they'd be able to take over big chunks of uh, land. So uh, I digress, though. That was the Ming Dynasty. So they took power by overthrowing the Mongol rulers, and they consolidated by improving agriculture, government reforms, building the Great Wall, adding to the Great Wall, not building it, doing the voyages, and that is how they gained and consolidated power.